Hi, I'm Lena, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Brontëlong reading vlog. This is the third vlog, meaning I'm going to read Wuthering Heights. Tonight we will have the first set of Wuthering Heights prints. It's already quite late in the month and I think Sarah started it already, but me and Mary are patiently waiting until we start the first set of reading sprints. Today it is the 20th of April and I'm going to start Wuthering Heights. I had planned to read this at the end of the month and just make myself heard by reading this in a short period of time, because I feel like Wuthering Heights is an emotional, impactful read and I don't know why I'm doing this to myself, but it's happening. It's not a good idea, but I'm still going to do it. So welcome to this vlog. I don't know how I'm going to annotate this one yet. Wuthering Heights is such an experience, I'm rereading this clearly, that I don't really know what I want to look out for. So I'm going to ask the girls tonight in a reading sprint how they are going to approach reading this book and what they are going to look out for. So I hope I can get some inspiration tonight. Start annotating from tomorrow on. I am now on page 97, so I'm almost 100 pages in. Yesterday we had our reading sprint with Mary and Sarah, which was more like a chatting sprint because I think we only did an hour of reading over 3 hours, but I had such a good time. I just love catching up with Mary and Sarah and Lucy, of course, when she's joining, but Lucy's not a fan of Wuthering Heights, so she's sitting this one out. I have pretty similar feelings so far as I did the first time around, but I think the first few chapters have way more meaning when you're rereading this book, because I remember being quite confused when I read the first few chapters. We meet a man, quite an elitist Victorian man, even though this is set pre-Victorian, but he gives me Victorian vibes. And he rents a house from Heathcliff and he goes to visit Heathcliff and his family, who he finds very strange. He doesn't really understand their family structure, they're very unhospitable, but he has to spend the night there because there's a snowstorm and he cannot go home. When he comes back home, he asks his housekeeper what is up with the family. That is where everything begins. That is where we get the novel of Wuthering Heights. We get the entire novel from the perspective of the housekeeper, and it's literally them, so the tenant and the housekeeper, they're sitting at a fireplace and she's telling him the history of the tenants of Wuthering Heights, or the occupants of Wuthering Heights. And in the first meeting where we meet the tenant and he meets everyone who is living there right now, there's so much information, and if you don't know the story yet, it kind of goes over your head. It's really difficult to understand. But this time around I did know the story and I could see so many little hints, so many little foreboding pieces that I just think Emily Brontë must have just thought every detail out before writing this book, and I didn't notice that, of course. That is just a little extra detail of Emily Bronte's genius. Annotating wise, I decided to just read the first few chapters and then see what I wanted to annotate, what was interesting me. So right now I have green for characters, blue for quotes and other things I noticed, so things I may want to look up. Some language things, like for example in the very beginning it is said that Heathcliff, when he's a boy, we meet him when he's a boy, that he speaks a language that no one understands. So it's not English, not a local dialect, and it's not clear what language he's speaking. And some people on the live show said that it could possibly be a form of Gaelic or Indian dialect or Spanish. So I have to look up if it's actually in the novel. But Heathcliff, his origin is quite dubious, in the sense that we get some hints, like he is compared to a dark-skinned gypsy by a few people I think in the novel, but later the housekeeper, who's called Nellie, wants to make him feel better, because he says like, I wish I was blonde and I had blue eyes like the Earnshaws. And she says, well, who knows, maybe your father was an emperor of China and your mother, okay, I forgot to tap it apparently, but she says that his mother might be Indian and his father might be Chinese, and that there's a whole history behind him. That kind of gives a lot of context as well in how he is treated, especially by his adopted brother. That is one of the things I'm tabbing. And then Gothic, because of course, just like Jane Eyre, that's an important part of these books. And then I have for pink Where Love Matters, because everyone always says Wuthering Heights is not a romance novel, and I agree, because the things that happen are not romantic. Basically this is just a lot of people hating each other, which was something I think Sarah said in the live or in a comment. Yes, it's true, these people are just constantly hating each other, but love matters in Wuthering Heights, because love is a motivation for almost all characters. Behind their behavior is why they do what they do. So Where Love Matters is something that I've been tapping quite a bit. If you can see the pink tabs. Violence is a very big theme in this book as well, and I'm especially curious to see how violence is a generational thing, how violence is copied, and how violence is used as revenge and defense. I think theme violence is very interesting in this novel, and it's a very big theme as well. I think so far what I found most interesting is I think the last two chapters that I read, chapter 7 and 8, because the pink tab, Where Love Matters, is very important in those chapters. And I just really want to talk to you guys about that. So from here on out, the vlog is going to be spoilery. I'm sorry, I know that was a package, a book package, whoop whoop. I'm sorry, I know that is earlier than with the other vlogs, but I just feel like I really need to talk details with this book. This is quite a different book, I think, from Jane Eyre and Agnes Grey, in a way that you want to talk about it, because the details and the way things wrap up is so important in this book, so I don't feel like I can sufficiently talk about it if I don't talk about spoilers. So if you haven't read this book, then you should probably end the video here, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video really soon. But if you have read it, maybe if you've read it with the Brontëlong, then thank you for joining. But let's talk about why love matters in this novel. I just got to the bit where Catherine accepts Edgar's proposal of marriage, and what happens after that is just a roller coaster. Nellie plays such a big role in that as well, because Nellie asks her, why do you want to marry Edgar? And Catherine gives multiple reasons why she wants to marry him. Something that stands out to me is, I think, my perception of this time, and we are now in, I think, the late 18th century, because the present is 1801. My perception of that time is that it was okay to just marry for convenience. If both parties agree, then you don't really need a very different reason than convenience and money and comfort to marry. But Nellie really asks Catherine to give her a good reason, and anytime she gives a reason, like the reasons I just mentioned, she says that's not good enough. And eventually Catherine admits why she really is going to marry Edgar, and that is for the money, and because she loves Heathcliff so deeply. She wants to get him out of the situation that he is in, under the control of her very violent brother. And I kind of like how she takes the only kind of control and power that she can have, and she wants to use it to protect the person that she loves. And just to be clear, I do not like Catherine. I think she is quite a diabolical person, but everyone except Nellie is at some point extremely diabolical in this book, so that's not saying much. She asks again, why do you love him, Miss Cathy? Nonsense, I do. That's sufficient. And I feel like that would have been sufficient in that time if you would have a conversation with someone like, where are you marrying? But Nelly just keeps on pushing her until she is honest. She asks, where is the obstacle? Here and here, replied Kathy, striking one hand on her forehead and the other on her breast. In whichever place the soul lives, in my soul and in my heart, I'm convinced I'm wrong. That sentence on page 85 in my book is the point where Wuthering Heights starts, because Kathy making that decision is where the tragic starts, is where the explosion erupts. But because when Heathcliff, of course, hears her decision, he leaves. And what happens when he leaves is, I think, like a little preview of how the book is going to end. Because when Nelly says, well, you will lose Heathcliff once you marry Edgar, she says that is not possible. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. And if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger. I should not seem a part of it. My love for Linton is like the foliage in a wood. Time will change it, I'm well aware, as winter changes the trees. My love for Heathcliff resembles the eternal rocks beneath, a source of little visible delight, but necessary. Nelly, I am Heathcliff. He's always, always in my mind. The language, oh, I'm so in love. Of course, in the end, it happens the other way around, and we see Heathcliff being closed off from his emotions, from the fact that he lives on Earth, because Kathy is no longer breathing on this earth. It feels like a little reverse preview of how the book will end. And then, of course, when Heathcliff is gone, we get this big storm, a violent wind, thunder, a split tree, a clatter of stones and soot into the kitchen fire, which I think is like Heathcliff's anger and heartbreak when she is leaving him. But the uproar passed away in 20 minutes, leaving us all unharmed, except Kathy, who got truly drenched for her obstinacy in refusing to take shelter and standing bonnetless and shawlless to catch as much water as she could with her hair and clothes. Which I think could reflect the fact that Heathcliff kind of does the same, but on an emotional, psychological level after she dies. And of course, this decision is eventually what kills her because of her longing towards Heathcliff. I did not like her death when I read it for the first time. Dying of heartbreak. I like the drama Wuthering Heights, don't get me wrong, but that was just one step too far for me. I didn't notice all of these things the first time around because I didn't know how the book was going to end. So maybe I will feel different about the ending. I've seen people like not loving this because it's just people hating each other, and I can see why. But this is, I think, the first Brontë book that we've read with the Brontëlong that I feel like I can really lengthily talk about, because yes, I'm already talking for 15 minutes. I'm not even on page 100 because I think there's so much in here. There's just so much in here. I will read about 30 pages a day, so I will finish this before the live show and have some time to gather my thoughts, to make some notes, of course, in my Brontëlong notebook, which I need to update, so I'm going to do that as well. And I'll chat to you when I have read more of Wuthering Heights. I am currently on page 203 of Wuthering Heights, which means I just finished part 1 and I read a little bit of part 2. I am enjoying this book so much, but it is really hard to pinpoint why I'm enjoying this book so much, because all the characters are awful, violent, and just hating on each other. What does it say about me that I like that? I think the biggest appeal of this book is Emily, her amazing writing, and the setting. Emily's writing is so beautiful and so compelling, and the pace of the book and how events are presented is done in such a way that this is such a compelling read and that you really want to keep on reading and that you feel all those reader vibes while you're reading it. I don't know how to describe it. Sometimes when I'm reading, I just feel really happy and inspired and myself, and this is the kind of book that really stimulates those kind of feelings in me, even though I can really see how these characters are incredibly awful. This is a book that just really makes me think, and I feel like I can ramble and talk about this book for quite a long time because the characters are so interesting. One of the subjects I think that is most interesting in this book, I think there are two subjects now that I'm mainly focused on. The first one is violence and how violence moves through a generation. And I don't mean like a blood generation, but a generation of people who live in a house together, of people who raise each other, who have a certain love, responsibility, relationship between each other. Where violence starts, violence continues. And I think that is done really interestingly in this book, because of course we have the two families, the Earnshaws and the Lintons, and Heathcliff, who is basically standing in between these two families. and Kathy as well stands in between these two families, and their relationship, their feelings for one another is what is destroying both of these families. The second thing I'm really trying to focus on is why love matters in Wuthering Heights, because I think I've said it before, but Wuthering Heights is not romantic, but love is a crucial theme and point in this book, because almost all motives, or maybe all motives, from the characters in these books is love. Whether that is love for another people, love for the material world, love for comfort. Of course, the most catastrophic form of love is love for another person, because of course we have Heathcliff and Cathy who love each other. I mean, there is no denying that they love each other. It is not romantic, it is not endearing, but they love each other. And that is what is so incredibly explosive and destructive in this book. Because in his love for Cathy, Heathcliff has such an incredibly strong sense of revenge, and I don't think it's just love for Cathy. I think it's also love for his honor, because of course Hindley was incredibly abusive towards him when he was a child, and he grew this sense of revenge and love for his honor and for standing up for himself. And that is what he does in such an abusive, violent and destructive manner when he returns to Wuthering Heights. Even when Hindley has died and Wuthering Heights is now in his possession, he is still not satisfied. Revenge is never enough. I was talking with Sarah and Lucy what could have happened between Heathcliff and Cathy, because it said in the book that as children and as teens they spent a lot of time together on the moors, and because we get the perspective of Nellie Dean, we never know exactly what happens between them. But of course you can interpret it much more than Nellie Dean could or would tell us, or the man she works for in this case, because I think it implies that Cathy made a certain promise to Heathcliff beyond just feelings that we don't know if they were outspoken. But I have been reading this book, What Matters in Jane Austen, and Jane Austen's novels and Jane Austen's world were set in the same period as Wuthering Heights is set. Wuthering Heights is even a little bit earlier. I think Wuthering Heights is set mainly when Cathy and Heathcliff grow up in the late 18th century. Most of Austen's novels are turn of the century or early 19th century. I always get so confused. This book has a chapter on sex and whether or not there was sex in Jane Austen's novels, and the author describes that premarital sex was viewed very differently than sex outside of marriage. So it did happen that people had sex but would eventually get married, and that basically being together, having sex before marriage, was done as an implication or a promise that marriage would happen. I was thinking, how could that kind of culture translate to Wuthering Heights? Because I feel like if Cathy and Heathcliff were intimate, if they had sex, because of course they were teens, they spent a lot of time with just them, they didn't really follow etiquette or rules. It even says that Cathy would run barefoot on the moors, which of course is, I think, one of the most unladylike things that she could have done. You have two teens in love who don't follow the rules. It makes a lot of sense to me to think that they were intimate and that they had sex, and within the culture of this time period that would have been a promise of marriage or the implication of the intention of marriage. When Cathy diverges from that and decides that her material love is bigger than her love for another human being, because she chooses Edward, who she's not in love with, over Heathcliff, who she is in love with, she is intentionally breaking a promise, which is so much bigger than her making a decision on her own with not having an outspoken or implicated promise towards Heathcliff that she will marry him. Emily leaves so much open for us to interpret what has happened on these moors, because Nellie Dean doesn't know. Nellie Dean probably does not want to know as well. So that is something that I have been finding really interesting to think about. Of course, it's quite on the nose that Heathcliff does all of this for love, and I have heard people say, especially maybe a little bit earlier in time, that they found Heathcliff like a romantic, dreamy guy, and I'm like, excuse me. I get the Mr. Rochester discussion because he is still kind of, well, I don't like him, but like I respect that other people do, and I can see how it's a bit of a discussion. But how can people like Heathcliff? He is so abusive. He is the absolute spitting image of an abusive, toxic man. Like, there is no discussion possible whether or not he is a vile man. That is, it's just there. He is written as such. I did also want to say a little bit about Kathy because she is interesting. She is vile as well. She's incredibly manipulative. Okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I have been reading it. I think Kathy is someone with a great hunger for power and control. I think it's a very human thing. But in her position, she doesn't have either, because of course she does not inherit Wuthering Heights. There's no great wealth in her family. There's no sense of independence for her. So the only way that she can feel a sense of power and control is to use the love that others have for her. In a sense against them, but I don't think necessarily against them, but more for her own benefit. So there are two people in this book who clearly love her a lot. We have Edgar Linton and we have Heathcliff. And she uses both of them against each other in her benefit in an incredibly manipulative way. But she uses that to both satisfy her love for material, so her material love, and her love for Heathcliff. She does that by giving both of them the sense that they might lose her, whether that is to an illness, or she also threatens with suicide, which is just horrible and manipulative. But I think it is for her the only way to feel a sense of power and control by choosing her material love over her human love. She basically, it is implied, it's what Heathcliff literally says, she kills herself. I don't know how I feel about the fact that she's in an embrace with Heathcliff and that she loses herself so incredibly much. A lot of things in that scene are not described, are not said. I mean, I think I probably missed it, but I didn't even know she was pregnant at that time. I think Nellie Dean says, like, we are expecting an heir, something like that. But I'm not sure how I feel about how her death comes to be. I think it would have been better if we had a more explicit explanation of the way that she died, because right now it seems almost an act of passion from her side to die. Like, I cannot be with Heathcliff, and because of that incredibly dramatic, probably suppressed human love, I will now die. I needed a bit more. I needed like maybe just a few explanations or details on like a very hard childbirth, because it seems to me that it's not so much her passions for Heathcliff. Maybe she didn't have a lot of spirit, but just her weak health because of her pregnancy and giving birth. That is one thing that I feel like doesn't really fit very well into the whole Wuthering Heights dramatics, because it's such a practical thing that should have been approached more practical, in my opinion. I'm curious to see how other people feel about that. Let me know in the comments down below. How do you feel about Kathy's death? Do like put in the beginning of the comment like spoilers, because not this entire vlog is spoilery of course, so I don't want to spoil anyone accidentally in the comments. But I would love to know how you feel about her death and how you feel about her passions. It's something I'm not really sure about, and I would love to hear your views on that. So I have about 150 pages to go in this book. It is Tuesday today, so I do have a few days to finish this one out before the live show on Sunday. I think once this vlog goes up, we have already done the live show, so I will leave the link to the live show on Sarah's channel in the description down below. Hello, it is Saturday, the day before the Wuthering Heights live show, and I have finished this 2 days ago. I think I gave it 5 stars, and I don't know why. Which I feel is such a weird thing to say, but I don't know why I love this book so much. I remember having the exact same feelings reading it the first time around. I was just like, this is amazing, I love it, but why? During one of the reading sprints, Sarah said that this is the kind of book that you don't feel like is screaming at you when you pick it up, but once you're reading it, you don't want to stop. And that I feel like is the perfect description of a 5-star book, that once you're in the world, once you're reading, you just don't want to stop. I am very satisfied with all the annotations I was able to make. I have been able to get a lot of different annotations on violence, because it is even a discussion that Heathcliff has at the end. It is a poor conclusion, is it not? An absurd termination of my violent exertions. I don't care for striking. I can take the trouble to raise my hand. I am too idle to destroy for nothing. Which everything comes together, and all Heathcliff's reasoning for violence comes together, and it has gotten him absolutely nothing. Which I feel like is one of those things that is said a lot, you know, revenge won't give you that satisfaction, and Heathcliff is the perfect example of that. And it all ties in so beautifully with everything that I was able to annotate of why love matters. I think it's so controversial to say that Wuthering Heights is a romance, but you know, what is the definition of a romance? Because in Dutch, we don't say novel, we say roman, from romance, which to me means a fictional story. And a fictional story in which often, because I think if you go back in history, don't quote me on this because I've forgotten a lot of my literature education from years ago, but I think what it is that it started with the romantics, with the authors, like everyone who wrote at the time, but in that kind of way of writing. And in that, feelings of love, whether that's for human, material, nature, whatever, is the basis of a novel, of a roman. So in that way I would say, yes, this is a romance if you look at it from that point of view, from that kind of definition, because love for materials, for human beings, for pride, for revenge, is what makes this book. If Heathcliff and Cathy didn't have their passions and love so incredibly intense to themselves, if all of their passions didn't make them do what they do, we wouldn't have a book, we wouldn't have a story. It's basically what Heathcliff says after I have gotten revenge for the way I was treated, for the way Cathy was taken from me. There will be no reason for me, and there is no reason for him at the end to keep on living, to keep on feeling any form of passion, because of course he starves himself and he dies. Same with Cathy, because she chose the wrong kind of love, which initiated Heathcliff with all his violence. So all the motivations are love, and therefore I would say, depending on what kind of definition you give it, this is a romance, because all motivations are for love. I don't say this often, I barely ever say this, but this book could have been bigger. The plot could have been slower and I would have enjoyed it so much. From all the Brontëlong books, this is my favorite so far. Jane Eyre is definitely a book you can read for all the different aspects you can read a book for. And I think that is why it's so popular. It has an engaging plot. It has a good build-up of a romance. It has characters on which you can agree and disagree, but there are some likable and dislikable characters in there. It just has everything. But it doesn't have the gut punch that Wuthering Heights does. And therefore, Wuthering Heights is my favorite so far. The Tenant of the Whiteful Hall, which, yes, I have an edition of this one right here. The Tenant of Whiteful Hall used to be my favorite so far, but that was back when I didn't really remember a lot of Wuthering Heights because it had been so long since I read it. Since this is the next book we're going to read, I am so curious how this will compare to each other, because I think in a social politics, society kind of way, this book is definitely more interesting. Feminist perspective, this book is more interesting, but I'm not sure it had the gut punch that this had. So we'll see, we'll see. It's going to be such an interesting journey. I'm enjoying the Brontëlong so much. I am looking forward to the live show because I feel like we're all going to have a lot of feelings, which I think this is going to be a really fun one. At the live show will already have been once I upload this vlog, so I will leave the link in the description down below. I'm going to finish my annotations, notes for the live show for tomorrow. And if you have joined the live show, then thank you so much for reading and chatting with us. If you want to join the Brontëlong, all the information on the Brontëlong is in the description down below. We have a Discord, live shows, reading sprints. That's about it. Yes, that's about it. I also have a playlist with videos and live shows, so you can find everything very easily on the description down below. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Doei!